What's going on in grief? There's so much about grief that we just assume. We assume as we get into it, as we experience it. There's so much about grief that really we have just kind of picked up haphazardly as we are growing up. There's a lot of things that have come into our understanding about grief that oftentimes, because of the way we understand it, or it's been presented to us, I like to say the way we are socialized in grief, that it can really create some problems for us. It kind of works against us in how the natural experience of grief really does work for us. So I'm really glad that you are here at this seminar, because we're going to talk about what's going on in grief. My name is Dr. Galen Gobin, and I'm the Grief Support Director for Forest Lawn. And here on this video, we're going to talk about some of the basics of grief, just a little bit about where it comes from. We're going to talk also about, some of the things that we can do to manage our grief and to experience it in really a much more positive way than what we have expected. So again, I'm really glad you're here with us, and this is a safe space. So put your name in on the chat down there. Tell us who it is that you're remembering at this time in this place here, and we can share together these love stories. If you got any questions, bring those up, put those in. I'm going to be monitoring the feed tonight, and I'll do the best that I can to get to those. If I don't, I certainly will get to them after the seminar is over. So again, really glad that you're here with us and that we together are a part of this healing community. You know, grief is a lifelong experience. It's something that from a very early age, we begin to go through, we begin to experience. We are, getting into life and having relationships, our parents and our siblings and our friends. Oftentimes we get pets, dogs or cats, or maybe it's birds, or in my case, fish. I had a bunch of fish in a fish tank when I was younger. They were my pets, and we take care of them. You know, you get attached to this pet. You walk the dog, you play with the cat, you feed the fish or the bird, you teach the bird to talk, and maybe with the fish, you really take care of the tank or something. Whatever it is, you have this relationship of togetherness with them. And these pets are our companions. We do everything together with them. And then, like everything that is mortal, they die. And that creates a real big problem for us, especially when we're little. We have not experienced that. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what's this? I feel so lost. I feel lonely. I'm crying. Wow, what is it that about this, this loss that now is causing me so much troubles? And that's the beginnings of grief. We take that pet, and maybe it's a small enough one, like a bird. Again, in my family, we had a bird at one time, and when Jane died, I remember we went out in the backyard and we scooped out a little place and put her in and covered her up, and we had a little experience together as a family to bury that pet. That happens with a lot of us, cats or dogs or whatever it is. And then somewhere down the line, oftentimes it's not very long, a new pet shows up. A new dog shows up. It's a surprise. The new cat comes in the door. Our parents who love us and want us to feel and know the best, and to not suffer, because boy, they know how grief is, and they know what the experience is, and They can see it in us as children, and the next thing we know, we get this replacement that comes in. It's not the former one, and we're supposed to build a new relationship with this. We're supposed to let go of that one that we had and allow this new pet to come into our life. And that's the way a lot of us begin to learn about grief. And that whole thing of replacement is a really old way of understanding grief. But again, it kind of clashes with the way grief really is a part of our life. The way it used to be was, well, when somebody died or you lost something or you lost someone, then you just cut them off. You just forgot about it. You just turned your attention elsewhere. And this is where the language comes from, you just move on. You move on in your life and you go and you build a new life. And that's what a lot of us still think and feel. And that hurts and that's hard because that's not what happens. And we can see that as kids when we watch our parents and see what it is that that they're going through when maybe our grandparents die, and we have we go to the funeral and we watch our parents and we see how much they've been changed and all. And sometimes the funerals are supposed to mark the end of grief, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. We still are going on with things. Those mourning rituals are really important for us. We do those things because they do help us navigate this really strange time that we are in and a part of, in particular, early on. And so we do the funerals and things, but it certainly doesn't put an end. It doesn't put a stopping point to our grief experience. Some of us, the way it used to be also was that there was kind of a mourning period that you would have. There was 1 year, and after 1 year, you were supposed to be done with. And we still kind of feel that way, but I can tell you that from what many people have told me, and that sometimes the second year can be even more challenging than the first. Because you think you've gotten it all done and out of the way and finished and finalized the way that we have been, again, socialized and taught to do that. And here comes some of the same feelings, particularly around, again, those anniversaries and those special days. So it can be a challenge. We have to move and learn within our grief and learn our own kind of rhythm and our own experience with that. Some of us do get some help from religious traditions that we follow. That give us time periods, give us things to do. I know that in some of the Christian religions that there are particular things that you do at 7 days and 1 month and 40 days and these different time periods. In Judaism, you sit Shiva for a week when the person first dies, and then there are a series, and I don't know the specifics exactly about it, but there are a series of things that you do for a particular time period in worship, saying the Kaddish. And these things help us through. But even these don't finish it for us. They don't finalize it. They don't wrap it up for us. It can be really, really hard because those are the ways that we've come to think about it. Some of those mourning rituals or those traditions that we have, some of the old ways we have of understanding a model of grief. And there's a real popular one that's around that you may recognize, it may just kind of be a part of who you are, because I know that's true for a lot of people. And it's a stage model of grief. And it talks about having 5, or even now there's a 6th stage to grief: denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. Well, the first thing I want to say, the stages, and it's that word, it's literally that word, stage, that can cause us some problems when we expect our grief to do that. that we expect ourselves to go through a particular stage, and then that means with that language that we're done with it. It's like a rocket blasting off. That stage is used, the rocket lets go of it, and it falls back to earth, and we're done with it. But again, that's not the way grief is. So the language can give us some misnomers and cause us some problems that we have. Stages have that sense of feeling of a beginning and an end. And one of the things in particular, that last one too, the idea of acceptance. The word itself has a finitude to it. There's a finality to it. And when we don't talk about it with other people, and we don't understand that there's a lot of space within that word, and truly within that whole model, because it's certainly not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. There's a whole lot of space in that to move back and forth and to move in and around things. And we have that idea of acceptance being the experience that, okay, well, I've accepted it, and so now I should be finished with it. Well, and the truth and the reality is that we are never finished with grief, because we are never finished with that person. I was reading the other day, and somebody, I don't remember whether it was on Facebook, and somebody had put a line, or maybe it was a book I was reading, but they had this beautiful thing, and they said, everybody we love dies one day too soon. And I think that's a great way of putting it. One day too soon. Because no matter how long we've had that person, no matter how long they have been in our life, no matter how long we have been working together and loving one another and being in a relationship with each other, it's always one day too soon, because we would want them for one more day. And one more day after that. And one more day, of course, after that. Because truly, love is never finished with someone. We're never completely done with someone. And we understand that, their death has happened. We may get that and rationally understand that, but it's still always, there's always a part of us, always a part of our heart that wants to share something more with them still to this very day. And so those kind of language and things can get us sort of caught up and have some troubles and struggle with what we might be feeling, because we can be afraid that we're not doing it right. And as Donna Sherman and I talked about in May, and I would invite you to go back to watch the interview that I had with Donna there is no right or wrong way to do grief. It is your way of doing grief. And it is the way that your heart and your love and your relationship with your person is inviting you into this experience of grief to heal yourself. Because that's what grief is about. It's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to shy away from. It's not something to push back against. Grief is something to be received. Grief is something to be embraced and to allow to change us, because it is a part. And what it means is that we've had a person in our life who's been a part of our life and now is a part from us. And we got to find a way in which we now carry on a relationship with them after they've died. That's the healing work of grief. It's what we need to do. And it's not an easy journey, and it's certainly not something that we just march our way through. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 10 steps forward, 3 or 4 back. It's just so chaotic and can be so very challenging and difficult. And part of that is that also one of the things that we don't understand about grief is how much and the multiple ways that it impacts us and how it plays out in our life. Most of us would give grief the emotional world in which we expect it to be. We think about grief and we think about the emotions that are a part of that. And there's anger and sadness and loneliness, and for some of us, a longing and anxiousness, and sometimes regrets. There's a lot more that goes on with that. But we think about and we know and we understand those emotional parts. And that's certainly a part of grief. But grief is also has physical components to it. It impacts us physically. It can be hard to breathe. We find ourselves swallowing a lot. That was something that C.S. Lewis talked about. How much grief is so much like fear. He finds himself swallowing and feeling just, these knots or these butterflies in the stomach. We literally can feel that the tightness in our chest or in our abdomen. Because grief is a stress response. Grief makes us feel anxious. And so we tighten up. We got to find a way to let go of that and to relax. We'll talk about that in a minute. But grief also affects us the way we eat. Yeah, and that's something we know about. How much we eat, and some people are like, well, I just can't eat and everything, and that's certainly a part of it. But for many of us, it doesn't have any impact at all on the way we eat. And for others of us, we're eating an awful lot more. We're trying to fill ourselves, trying to fill up a hole that we feel inside of us. And so we find ourselves eating. So that's one of the ways that physically it impacts. Give us some trouble and interrupt our sleep, in our sleep patterns, and the way we find ourselves and how our energy levels during the day. We may stay extremely busy, or we may just not be able to do much at all. All of these are normal experiences of grief, but they're not things that we really have been taught and are aware of. So it's also an emotional, a mental experience. Our brain feels like it's in a fog. And part of that fog is the fact that for some of us, we really just don't care. Don't care what I think or do or whatever. Why should I? My person has died. My parent has died. My child has died. My relationship physically is over with that person. And I don't know what this world is like anymore. And so I really don't care. And I try to read the newspaper, take my mind off of it. Can't concentrate. Try to read a book. Can't concentrate. Can't understand what's being said. Listen to something and it just sort of goes in one ear and out the other. These again are ways that grief impacts us on a cognitive manner, on mental processes. And that's a lot. Boy, you take all those things and you wrap them up inside of us, and boy, there's a lot going on there and everything. But grief also affects us socially. We oftentimes don't have the energy, we don't have the desire, and so we pull ourselves back. We isolate ourselves. When really, one of the things that matters most as we grieve is finding that social support. So we isolate because things just don't seem important and we don't care. And so we feel extra lonely. And that's hard. Or maybe we're alienated and people stay away from us. They don't know how to be around a grieving person. We don't fault them for that. They just don't have the capacity themselves to be able to handle their own grief and what that loss is drawing out of us in our grief. So they stay away. But that's hard because, again, we need that social support. And sometimes those are the people that we expect to provide that support for us. And they are not there for whatever reason. They can't be. And truly, some of these things are things that we need to do. We do need to have some time alone and some quietness because grief makes us slow down. I like to say that, grief is living at 3 miles an hour. Makes us slow down. We should. reevaluate things. And so we got to find our own comfort zone. How often we want to go out and be with people, and how often we just want to stay in and wrap ourselves in, a blanket, or be at home and have a cry if we need to, or just turn on the TV and let the sounds be there and be another person in our house for us. Find our own things. Again, no right or wrong way. It's your way. It's your way of figuring that out. And the last way that grief impacts us is kind of what I call the spiritual side of it, the spiritual portion of who we are. We're all spiritual creatures. And how do we look at the world? How do we understand the world? Sometimes there's a theistic experience with that, as if we're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, or a variety of other denominations and experiences that have a God or a being that is there and is working with things. We give ourselves to that. And oftentimes a death will call that into question. What do we do? How do we work something into our life that didn't have a place for it beforehand? We don't expect our person to die by suicide, take their life. We don't expect our person to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. What is fair in this world? What is justice in this world? These are all parts of this spirituality, this spiritual understanding of the world. It's the lens, if you will, through how we view the world, and it gets called into question. It's a part of what it means to experience a death and then to reevaluate the way we look at life and the way we're going to live life. But boy, is that hard. That is hard to have all of those ways impacted in us when we're just trying to find some stable ground to stand on today and make sure that I get a cup of coffee and can find my way to work. It can be really challenging. So let me talk about some helpful suggestions. Let me talk about some helpful suggestions for what you can do to respond to your grief, to give yourself the best hand that you can have to move through this. It's not going to fix it. It's not going to change it. It's not going to make it go away. But it will give you some tools. So first thing I want to say is really to take care of our bodies. Our bodies are the way we interact with the world, and so that's really important. And it can be really hard to get enough to eat and the right kinds of foods to eat and to get enough sleep, especially if we don't feel like eating, and especially if we're not able to sleep at night. Or maybe we're like some of those that do sleep and we sleep really hard, but it really is not almost a refreshing sleep. So get some exercise. That does a couple of things. Works your body, works out the stress, it moves your body and all, and do whatever is comfortable for you. And that may be walking, it may be running, it may be going to the gym. There are a lot of different ways to get exercise. It might be vacuuming the house or working in the garden. Getting something physical where you're really doing some physical kind of activity will really help you in a lot of ways, because one thing, if you're not used to it, you go out and you take a good long walk, it's going to make you tired. Hopefully you'll sleep better with that. Not always guaranteed, but the odds increase. And the other thing that it's going to do is that it works calories and you'll get feeling hungry. Now, then you've got to take your head in charge of this and not just grab yourself dish ice cream or an ice cream sandwich or something that's just got these full of calories that don't really help you. You got to eat good. You need to eat as I say, your fruits and veggies. Do something well with that. That will be really, really important for you and helpful for you. So eating well, getting good exercise. That takes care of your physical body. That's one. Another way is mentally, give yourself permission to grieve. Now, what I mean by that is allow yourself to feel and experience whatever you're feeling and experiencing. No matter what the emotion that's coming up, it's yours. And something has called it up inside your being, inside your soul. Something about your relationship with your person has called that up. And, if we allow it to have its place in our life, then it will make some changes within us. It will do some things with us. But we also give ourselves permission then to say, this is just what I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling empty or lost or lonely or regretful or guilty, or maybe I'm feeling a sense of relief. It's been a long, long journey with all the doctor's appointments and things. Some of those things we may not want to allow ourselves to feel. But if we can, giving ourselves the permission to do that, then it gives the space within us for those emotions to do with us what they need. And that's a really, really good thing that you can do for your grief. Emotions, thinking about it, thinking about that, giving yourself that permission and allowing that stuff to be there. Well, maybe you want to write some of that down. Speaking about it, talking to somebody, that helps to what we call externalize. It gets it outside of us, and we're not holding on to it then. To do that kind of work, journaling or finding a friend to talk to, or maybe if it's a particularly difficult death, we might need to find a good counselor, someone who can listen to us and help us to kind of make some sense of some things. And that's okay. That gets it out, that releases it, that lets it go. One of the things I like about writing about it is that we can always go back and check. And one of the cool things is that you go back and you check and you see where you were and you read where you are now. And what a big, long difference. What a big, long difference. And if you try it for a while, a couple of 3 months, and it's not an everyday kind of thing, that's kind of hard to do sometimes, but just grab yourself a spiral bound notebook and a pen and sit down and write for a few minutes and just write what you're feeling. Write what's there. Write what you miss. Write a letter to your person. There's a lot of different ways to do that. But by having a record of it, then you can go back and see it. And when you see how far you've come, that gives you encouragement. You get encouraged in your grief. So try writing about it. Try letting those emotions and getting some of that mental fog moving around there. Another thing you can do is for the social world is, again, back with this isolation or whatever, give yourself find that rhythm, the rhythm of being in by yourself and going out with other people, letting your letting your energy come back to yourself and be a part of your own, where you collect it for yourself and you're not giving it out to other people, because grieving is hard, needs a lot of energy. So you give yourself that that time to be by yourself and to, allow that to renew. Find your comfort zone with that. That's really important. Find a good friend, somebody that will listen to you tell the story about how you just doesn't feel like this could be real for the 4th or 5th time or the 10th or 12th. And they're just going to sit there and listen to you. And they're a good friend. That's really, really helpful. And then in your spiritual world, and this is really hard because we as human beings don't like this, but I would invite you to try to allow some ambiguity. You don't have to find the exact answers right now. asking the questions is a great place to start. If your spiritual lens is in a theistic faith, then it's okay to say, hey, God, why did this happen? Go and look at your scriptures. Look at the things that have been written and read some of the stories of some other people there. They've got a lot of the same questions that you have. Why did this happen? Why does this feel so bad? Why is this so hard? What shall I do? All I do is cry. All I do is feel terrible. I don't want to do anything. You can find that you're in really good company with those who are in, the scriptures that way. If you have some good readings or some good people that you follow who are philosophers or whatever, or understand the world, read some of that as best you can. And allow those questions to just kind of bounce around for a while. All they're doing is bouncing around, allowing that ambiguity, allowing a sense of just not knowing just yet, can oftentimes, when everything does begin to settle, give you that opportunity to take a step forward, and in your faith or in your understanding in your spiritual life in the world, that will help you to feel better in the world and understand a lot more about how this life is lived. It's one of the strange, weird, kind of odd gifts that grief gives to us. So allow for that ambiguity. Just again, so much of this is giving yourself permission to feel and do what you're doing. Because remember, there's no wrong way to do grief, as long as you're not hurting yourself. It is your grief and your grief alone. So I want you to remember that you're not a victim with your grief. You are not a slave to your grief. You don't have to feel entrapped by it. Yes, it can be all around, and it is everything that you might feel that you are looking at, but that's the way it's supposed to be for right now. But you don't have to feel like you're a victim and it's just going to pounce on you. You may have an experience where it flares up, and that's okay. That's a normal thing too. You can and do feel and experience this grief, whatever it is. What you do with it, wrestling with it, trying to understand, having a day where you've got things you've got to do. You've got to go to work. You've got to get some stuff done. You've got to get the kids off. You have to, you've got some plans for the day, whatever they may be, that are really important. And you have to set your grieving aside. Sometimes we compartmentalize that and say, not right now. And that's okay. We wrestle with it. We set it aside. We go and we do, and we come back and pick it up later and work with it. All of that is a part of this process. It's all of how we do that. I want to close here with a poem. You may have heard of it. The poet was writing this in, I think it was the 1200s, which would be the 13th century. The poet is a very famous one. His name is Rumi. He's a Sufi poet. And this poem is called The Guest House. And I think it speaks about who we are and what our experience of grief can be when we give it permission to come and to be a part of us, and we embrace it as the experience, and we embrace it as the outcome of a loving relationship that we have, that it is. A relationship that we have that we want to find a way to carry forward. So here's Rumi's poem. It's called, again, The Guest House. And I'll post it. I'll post a link to it in the chat when we're done. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Yeah. Each are a part of your grief, whatever it is for that day, whatever it is for that moment. And they've been sent as a guide from beyond, from your loving heart and the heart of your person who died, trying to find their way back together again. Sending you a message. Be with me here, now, in this place, through this. And let's go forward together. I want to thank each of you for joining us here again on Journeys Through Grief. It is a safe community. We're building a good, strong community here of caring people. I invite you to follow us on Facebook so that you can be together in our journey of grief, and that you will find the comfort, the support, and the strength that you may be needing at that moment when you stumble across us, when you come and look, when you find somebody's words or a post that speaks to you and gives you the strength that you need right at that moment. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sending you peace as you grieve your loss.